technique I'm going to show you now can double fluency in a day. Let me give you an example. Now that's only if your word form area is firing and your word attacks good. A kid came into my class, had been in Orton-Gillingham for 2 years. Now the problem with Orton is they often don't have time to read in books. They just read word lists and things. So he was reading, I put him in a like 5th grade book. What did I put him in? Yeah, like 5th, I think. And timed him, he's writing 55 words a minute. So then I taught him how to phrase read. Phrase reading answers the question who, what, where, when, and why. And I talked about he walked, what question? That's who and what. About 6 blocks, that's how many. Up James Street, that's where. Turn left, that's where. To his home, where. It was a classic brownstone Georgetown townhouse. That's what? His parents, that's who. So I would basically point out phrases and he would answer the question who, what, where. Then if I'm on the internet, I would echo phrase where I'd read a phrase and then he'd read after me. So he walked and he'd go, he walked. About 6 blocks up, he'd go 6 blocks up. Okay. James Street, and he'd go James Street. George, do this with me if you wouldn't mind. And turn left.
And turn left.
To his home.
To his home.
It was a classic.
It was a classic brownstone
Georgetown house.
Brownstone Georgetown townhouse.
His parents.
His parents.
Who had taught.
Who had taught.
At the university.
At the university.
Notice I swing and then I come back. I have to do this echo drill when I'm not live. Now, if I'm with him, I will swing and we'll read at the same time, but the computer is a second late, so that doesn't work. So I do the echo drill. Now, once he does pretty good at the echo drill, this is usually 1 day, I will then point to the phrase and he'll read to it. Ready, George?
Yep.
Go ahead, read to my cursor.
Are we at Pep passed the 3-foot black iron fence and went through a small gate. He walked up the 5 steps to the entrance and unlocked the door. He entered the small hallway with the crystal chandelier and then turned right into his large living room.
Then I pick it up and I watch him phrase. Go ahead, George, let me see you do it. And I might give him, which I did with one of my guys, the cursor, so I can watch his phrasing. Okay, you don't have to do this, especially if you have a kid who screws up whenever they take control. I would just lift it up, but go ahead, George.
It had a soft tan leather couch and 2 matching leather chairs placed in front of a large red brick fireplace. On both sides of the fireplace were large oak bookcases that went from the floor to the ceiling. They were filled with books on history, philosophy, and literature, and were the best gifts his parents had given them.
Great job, George. All right, with me. Ready? Go ahead. I'm going to take control. Go ahead.
He threw a few logs on the fire with the starter paper, and the wood burst into a brilliant red. He put on Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, selected a book, and hopped on the couch.
Okay, once they can do that pretty well, I teach them double phrasing. All double phrasing is natural reading. He threw a few logs on the fire. It's really like 3 small phrases. He threw a few logs on the fire, lit the starter paper, and the wood burst into a brilliant red. He put on Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, that's 2 phrases. Selected a book as 1, hopped on the couch is like 1. So a good reader uses a combination of double and single phrases. So once his phrasing is good, I'll go to double. Now, this kid who'd had Orton for 2 years, reading 55 words a minute, came into a workshop I was doing in Michigan. And I taught him phrases and I picked it up and he went right into single and double phrasing, never phrased before. But you see, we have a processor that Chomsky and Pinker talk about that allows a child in the age 1 month to learn any language. And later on, it helps us organize grammar. It's a language processor. And that's what helps us get a sense of phrasing and grammar. Well, his was really good and he just had a feel for it. He went to 55 to 110, 20 minutes later that day. So the whole group thought this was a con. And the mom had said, I'd never seen this guy before. He then went, I basically took him out of tutoring. I said, he doesn't need tutoring anymore. He's got his own processor tutor. He just needs a phrase read every night. By the way, he was going 3 days a week at supper time, so they never ate supper together for a couple of years. The kids would come and watch. So this kind of gave him a lot of freedom. He eventually emailed me a month later. He was up to 160 words a minute. So the phrase reading makes a big deal. But notice that the phrase and double phrase came out of quick sounds, quick syllables, quick multi-syllables, which he had done in Orton. The beat the clock and the developmental series that grows developmentally, okay? The other kid I mentioned, it was the one I'm working with, who started out at like 35 words a minute, and Pep Baker with 3 errors, I think. He now, the latest one was like 160 words a minute. And we're doing a lot of beat the clock, and I'm doing a lot of that, like, okay, let's read 200 words a minute, get down to 15 seconds. I do a lot of that with him, okay? Okay. Then also another technique is when I take over, I model fluency and I pick up his pace. So when I'm taking over with the echo drill, I pick up the pace to do it. So a combination of fast sounds, fast syllables, fast breaking syllables. Now applying it with a developmental series, the key, because without a developmental series, I would have gone nowhere, because there'd be no developmental growth. So a developmental series that continues the growth as you go up through books, then phrasing and double phrasing boost it up. And then the only limit is the child's processing. You have some kids with pretty severe dyslexia that will get maybe to 100 words a minute, and that may be as fast. They'll be a good detail reader, but they don't read fast. So I, at the same point, encourage them to get books on tape and CDs, audible books, to listen to novels from school. I find kids that are pretty severe dyslexia tend to read magazines and directions. They use the reading for more practical things. In school, they'll use software. Okay, so that's kind of my overview. From that, Angela, what are some questions you might have?
And you know, I can attest, when I did the beat the clock with him, there was just so much more engagement with
Right.
him. You know, because with that ADHD, you know, he needed something to keep him focused on what we were doing. So that was really good. I guess I just have to go on your website to look more to find the program, so I can kind of see systematically, because that's really what I need. I need something that's systematic.
Right.
Working with him to move forward. And then, you know, just kind of other things to keep those kind of students engaged. I mean, we're, you know, in the virtual world, the students with the ADHD, you know, and I noticed that you had the little, your board where you were kind of moving things around. Were any other things like that that you recommend where kids can actually like be active like that?
Well, again, you were right. It's got to be systematic. My board correlates with the books. So once an example would be,
Okay.
Now we have 14 reading series to choose from ages kindergarten through adult. So no kids ever put down. But when I'm teaching when I clean up the consonants and vowels, which I do in a day or two, I have them in a book. Then when I teach 2-syllable words like magnet and basket, which is again short vowels, there's a book. And then when I teach 2-syllable open vowels like raven and latex, there's a book. And when I teach our
You're
family,
still showing Pep Baker, Dad. I don't know if that's what you want.
okay, gotcha. Thanks, George. So when I'm teaching these consonants and teams and short vowels, there's a book for that. When I'm teaching that with 2-syllable words, short vowels, there's a book. When I'm teaching our family, there's a book, and diphthongs, there's a book, and what I call walkers or green ones and yellows. So we have a book correlating to the board. So the board we deliver, and this is where we review, but we don't just review with the sounds. We will then do some nonsense words with the pattern. So if they are at diphthongs, we'll say pull out shoy toy, and they will pull out shoy toy. And then we'll say make it shout to, and they will go shout to. This is advanced, but just to show. So if they can do this, they can now start sounding out words of multiple levels. Okay, so that's part of the program. So it's kind of systematic, and the use of that makes it work, but that won't keep ADD kids totally busy. So we have developed a special lesson called the Reluctant Learner Plan.